What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. We'd also like to give a special shout out to one of Not Your Average Meta's generous patrons, Martin Stanley, for everything he's done to help out the channel. On this week's episode of Not Your Average Meta, we're bringing you another fun game we filmed on at the Hobby Horse in Taylorville, Illinois. This week's matchup features Martin returning, playing his Griffin Tribal deck being led by Zeriam Golden Wing, Patrick playing the classic mono-red commander Purphoros God of the Forge, Foggerl playing a throwback Voltron deck being led by Rafiq of the Mini, and Foil playing the OG Dominaria Jodah Archmage Eternal. Now that we've our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Foil plays a tapped Selesnya Guildgate, then passes to Martin, who plays a Plains. Patrick plays a Kirk Heap for turn while Fog plays a tapped Seagate, choosing white as it enters play. Foil plays a Command Tower, then pays 2 and casts an Arcane Signet. Martin draws and plays a Plains before paying 2 to cast a Silver Beak Griffin. Patrick plays a Mountain for turn and passes to Fog, who plays a Forest and casts a Jukai Naturalist. Foil plays a tapped Mirror Guildgate for turn and then pays 2 to cast a pair of Swiftfoot Boots. Martin plays another Plains and then casts a Sparring Regiment, which has him learning, discarding a Plains and drawing a card. He then goes to combat, swinging his Griffin over at Fog, which has it untapping and getting a +1/+1 counter, dealing 3 damage to Fog. Patrick just plays another Mountain and passes. Fog plays a Plains for turn and then casts a Hardy Outlander. Foil plays a tapped Orzhov Guildgate for turn before paying 4 for a Solemn Simulacrum, going to get a Mountain from his library while he passes his turn to Martin. Martin plays a Plains for turn and then taps out to cast his commander Zeriam. Martin then kindly cuts Foil's deck before going to combat, swinging his Griffin over at Patrick, which has him untapping and getting a 1/1 counter. Once damage is dealt, this then creates Martin a Griffin token, and on his end step, Patrick casts a Chaos Warp targeting his commander. This then has Zeriam go into the command zone and Martin shuffling his deck before revealing the top card of his library, which has a Phyrexian Vindicator coming into play for free. Patrick plays a 4th Mountain and then finally has enough to cast his commander Purphoros. Fog plays a 2nd Force for turn, then pays 4 for a Circuitous Root, which has him going into his library in order to get 2 gates to put into play. Foil plays a Terramorphic Expanse as his lane for turn before casting a Rhythm of the Wild. He then casts an Ignoble Hierarch, which comes in with a 1/1 counter, before cracking his Terramorphic Expanse and passing his turn to Martin, who plays a Plains for turn while Foil goes to get an island from his library. Martin then goes to combat, swinging a Griffin at both Fog and Foil while he swings a Vindicator over Patrick for 6 damage. Martin then casts the oldest Griffin card I've ever seen and passes his turn to Patrick. Patrick draws and plays a Mountain before paying 4 and casting a Leyline Tyrant. Fog plays another Force for turn before finally paying to cast his commander, Rafiq. He then pays to enchant his commander with the Spider Umber and passes turn. Foil draws for turn and then also pays to cast his commander Jodah, who enters with a 1/1 counter, before he then pays in order to equip his commander with the Swiftfoot Boots. Martin plays a Plains for turn before paying 5 to cast Zubiri Golden Feather, who is an honorary Griffin. He then goes to combat, once again swinging a Griffin over at Foil and the Vindicator over Patrick, taking him down to 23 life. On his end step, Patrick puts a red mana into his mana pool before paying 3 in order to cast a Sulfuric Vortex, and then paying an additional 4 to cast Ib, Halfheart Goblin Tactician, dealing 2 damage to each of his opponents. On his upkeep, Fog loses 2 life and draws for turn. He then plays another Force for turn before enchanting his commander with a Steel of the Godhead. Fog then activates his Basilisk Gate, targeting his commander before then going to combat, swinging him over Patrick for 20 commander damage. On his upkeep, Foil loses 2 life and draws for turn, before he then pays to cast a Ruinous Ultimatum. In response, Patrick creates 4 Cobalt tokens, dealing 8 damage to each of his opponents. This then destroys all of his opponent's non-land permanents except for Fog and Patrick's commanders. Foil then goes to combat, swinging his commander over at Martin for 5 commander damage, before he then pays to cast a Nature's Lord, going to get a land from his library. Martin draws and then casts a Harrier Griffin. Patrick just draws for turn and passes. Fog draws and then pays to cast an Awesome Presence, enchanting his commander. Fog then pays to once again activate his Basilisk Gate, targeting his commander, before he then goes to combat, swinging him over at Martin for 14 commander damage. Foil draws for turn and then uses Jodah's ability to help him cast Tapa Primal Dawn. Foil then decides to go to combat swinging Jodah over at Fog along with Zoltapa. In response, Fog exiles Zoltapa with a Path to Exile, and in response to that, Foil exiles Fog's commander with the Swords to Plowshares. Zoltapa then gets exiled and Fog gains 3 life, while Foil goes to his library to get a land to put into play tapped, and Fog takes the 5 commander damage. Martin draws for turn and then plays another Plains before he then pays 6 in order to recast his commander. He then goes to combat swinging his Griffin over at Defenseless Fog for 3 damage so he can create another token. On his end step, Patrick creates a Kobold, once again dealing 2 damage to each of his opponents. He then draws for turn and plays another Mountain. Fog draws and then casts a Sakura Tribe Elder before he then pays to recast Rafiq a second time. Foil draws for turn and then uses Jodah in order to cast Peru the Volatile. He then goes to combat and swings Peru over at Fog for 7 damage while he gains 7 life. Foil then casts an Emergency Powers, which has each player shuffling their hands and graveyards into their library and drawing 7 new cards, while Fog sacks Steve in order to go get a land while he's shuffling. Everybody then draws their 7 cards and Foil plays a Tap Selesnya Guildgate as his land for turn. Martin plays another land for turn before then casting Lay Down Arms in order to exile Peru and have Foil gain 3 life. Martin then pays to cast a Courier Griffin, which has him gaining 2 life himself. Martin then goes to combat swinging all out at Foil, which has Foil blocking Martin's commander with Jodah, and in response, Martin casts Unbreakable Formation in order to make all of his creatures indestructible. Foil then takes the rest of his damage and Martin creates 2 more Griffin tokens. On his end step, Patrick creates another Kobold dealing 2 damage to each of his opponents. He then plays a Mountain for turn and casts Norn the Wary dealing 2 damage to each of his opponents. He then also casts Krinko's Command, which has 2 Goblin tokens coming into play dealing 4 damage to each of his opponents, taking Fog out of the game. This then has Norn exiling himself and then returning to play dealing 2 more damage, taking Martin out of the game. Foil draws for turn and then casts a Cruel Ultimatum dealing 5 damage to Patrick, winning him the game. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe in order to see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.